Scoffer the Trog had a head like a dog. It was hairy and all covered in teeth. Scoffer the Trog lived in a bog on the edge of Stinky Heath. Eric the Eagle passed over a tall sloping ridge around 200 feet tall at its highest point. On the other side was a vast bogland. Beyond that, way off in the distance, were what looked like two huge monuments, light grey monoliths whose view was impaired by a rising mist from waterfalls that were cascading from each of the colossal structures. As they drew nearer, the outline became more clear. "Are they taps?" asked the professor. "Taps?" asked Eric, puzzled. "They're known as the Marsh Towers. They flow into a great river and keep the boglands boggy." Eric turned and headed towards a large village on the edges of the marsh. It was surrounded by a wooden stake wall that was over 20 feet high. "Bogtown," remarked Eric, as they came into land on some solid ground in front of the town gates. "Who lives here?" asked the professor. "Scoffer the Trog. He's the king of the Dogmen and Dogwomen of Stinky Heath." The professor's gaze was captured by some of the town's inhabitants. Dog-like creatures as tall as humans, but covered entirely in matted hair. "Oi, oi!" came a loud voice as a strong-looking dogman walked out through the main gates towards them. The professor had dismounted and stood, looking down at the mud covering his best brogues. "All right, Pickles, how's it going?" "Eric, you big old lump," bawled the dogman heartily. "And who's this fella?" extending his hand towards the professor, who in turn accepted the dogman's welcome. "Scoffer the Trog at your service," he said as he patted the professor on the arm, leaving a large muddy print on his tweed overcoat. "Oh, sorry about that," said Scoffer, attempting to wipe off the mud. "It's quite all right," said the professor nervously. "You're just in time. Today is Bogball final day, and yours truly is captain in the Rovers. Meet me at the stadium in 30 minutes. "Who are you playing?" asked Eric excitedly. "The Hairy Pogs." Eric flew the professor over to a large, ramshackle outdoor stadium that was packed with dog folk, families and large packs of young dogmen, all making a din, howling, barking and singing songs. The stands were made from stone, much like an amphitheatre. The shape of the pitch was closer to that of football or rugby, but was much smaller, around half the size. The pitch itself was made up of partially flooded marshland. Raised up at each end were 3 plug holes spread evenly along the pitch's width. Eric let the professor down onto the top section of one of the stands. Eric stood on the ground outside, but could easily see over the stand into the ground. "There are 2 teams and 1 ball. Each team will try and get the ball into one of the plug holes to score a point. The middle plug is worth 2 points, while the outside plugs are worth 1, explained the Eagle enthusiastically, as the professor wiped mud from his shoes with his handkerchief. Out from a passageway, running from the largest of the stands, ran 2 teams. The crowd went wild, barking, cheering and howling. "Awoo!" howled a dogman, sat near to the professor. Others followed his lead. "Awoo!" echoed through the stadium. "Come on, Scoffer! Come on, Stinky Heath!" He shouted all the more enthusiastically as Scoffer waved to the crowd from the centre of the pitch. There were 7 dogmen in all making up the Bogball team. A large dogman stood on a platform at the side of the pitch, holding a cone-shaped tube, which he used as a loud hailer. "Ladies and gentle dogs, I give you Stinky Heath." The crowd roared their approval. "Introducing Kane." "Awoo!" went the crowd. A tall, strong-looking dogman who was stood near the centre plug raised his hands and waved at the crowd. "Bruno." Another cheer. "Rex T." The biggest dogman in the team held up his hand. "And the fastest of them all, Bozo, aka the Charger." Another cheer. "Fido Flame." A smaller, young-looking dogman with spiky hair waved at the crowd, whilst packs of young lady dogs cheered and jumped up excitedly. And a veteran of many a campaign, "Stan the Man." A huge roar of appreciation this time. "And your one and only, the best of them all, the most crowned champion of all time, your very own Scoffer the Trog." The crowd burst into the biggest cheer yet and began chanting, "Scoffer! Scoffer! Scoffer!" Scoffer pumped both fists into the air and shouted, "Come on! Come on!" The crowd went wild again. Then from the passageway, a strange-looking team of creatures began to emerge. They looked like giant, luminous pink orbs, wearing pink shorts and covered in long, fuzzy pink hair. They had huge eyes and mouths, 2 legs and no arms. They wore sweatbands to keep their luminous hair from flopping in front of their faces. "Boo!" began the crowd. The opposition had taken to the pitch. It was the Hairy Pogs. The professor found himself chuckling at the ridiculous nature of the scene. "Don't laugh at them Pogs," said the dogman sat next to him. "They're a great team, not to be taken lightly." The professor nodded and smiled. All the players ran around for a minute or two longer, warming up, and then they were called into the centre of the pitch by the referee, a small chap in a black jersey with golden fur, carrying a smallish black leather ball in his hand, about half the size of a football. "You play to my whistle," he barked with authority. "What I say goes. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," said both captains in unison. "Right, take your positions. Let's begin." The whistle went. The crowd roared to life once more. Both teams raced towards the centre of the pitch, where the ref had placed the ball. Typically, Bozo got there first, but uncharacteristically knocked the ball forward, only for it to be picked up in the mouth of a Hairy Pog player. He turned and spat the ball at high velocity towards a teammate behind him. Shwoom! Went the ball as it was spat forward with high levels of skill and precision. The Pogs were quick over the ground, surprisingly quick for a team that wore pink wellies. Shwoom! Again the ball was propelled forward like a missile to an advancing Pog on the right wing. He caught it expertly in his teeth and then shroom! Straight down the right hand plug hole. 1-0 to the Hairy Pogs, shouted the announcer. This wasn't popular with the home crowd. Now it was the Dogmen's turn to kick off. "Come on, liven up boys," shouted Scoffer as he bent down to pick up the Bogball from the centre of the pitch. The whistle went again, wheep, and Scoffer skillfully threw the ball like an arrow backwards to Fido for aim. Fido passed it to Bozo on the wing and then back inside to Bruno, who threw a speculative effort towards the centre plug. It cannoned back off the rim onto the pitch, where it was met by Scoffer advancing at pace. He scooped up the ball effortlessly with one hand and then smashed the ball into the centre plug. Roar! The crowd went wild. The professor laughed as he jumped up and down with the dog folk in the crowd, taken up in the moment. 2-1 to Stinky Heath. This time the Pogs took the ball at the whistle. Shroom, 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 shroom. The ball moved at a ridiculous pace between the Pogs. Dogmen were flying from left and right, knocking Pogs off their feet with some brutal tackles, but it was no use. The Pogs moved the ball too quickly, and this time, shlunk, straight into the middle plug. 3-2 to the Hairy Pogs. The crowd roared their disapproval once more. Then the half-time whistle blew. "Right boys, we've got to tighten up on them. Tighten right up." Scoffer punched the flat of his hand. "We've got to win the start off. Bozo, get up on them. And this time, remember to pick up the ball, you dope." "Okay, Scoff. Let's not give the ball away cheaply. We won't get it back too often. When we get the ball, again, Bozo and Fido, go long, left and right. Okay?" "Yep, Scoff." They both nodded. The whistle sounded for the second half. This time Bozo was much more alert after his telling off at half-time. He grabbed the ball and then swerved to his left, beating the first Pog. Then swerved to his right, beating a second, only to be walloped by a third. Boosh! Bozo fell to the swampy ground with a thudding splash. He had the mind to flick the ball up behind him as he hit the mud. There it was met by Fido, who tipped the ball up with his knee and then caught it. With a brilliantly quick sidestep and turn of pace, he sent the last Pog defender splashing into the ground and then spiralled a highly accurate throw into the middle plug. Roar! The crowd went wild again, this time even louder than before. 4-3 to the Stinky Heath Rovers. The Pogs once again began to fire the ball around the pitch at an incredible speed. This time though, the Dogmen were waiting for them with an organised defence. After many minutes of wrestling and tackling in the middle of the park, the ball broke free and was picked up by Scoffer. He played a brilliant overarm pass to Bruno, who in turn passed it back to Scoffer on the overlap. He charged through towards the middle plug, but was hit hard by a Pog defender. Oomph! Scoffer hit the ground and slid away from the centre plug, but stopped just short before the plug on the right hand side. I'll take the point. He slammed the ball into the plug before the defenders were on him. 5-3 to Stinky Heath, announced the caller hopelessly through the roars of the crowd. How long, ref? The referee looked at his sand timer in his pocket. 2 minutes. Right, boys, let's see this one out, and the cup is ours. 2 minutes. Concentrate. Again, the Pogs got off to another fast start with Dogmen flying in from all angles. With a brilliant pass forward, their captain set their front player free and he was through on the centre plug. Everything seemed to slow down as he charged into range. Oh no, cried the professor, fully engrossed by now. He watched helplessly as the Pogs ran through. A draw, surely, he thought to himself. Then from out of nowhere, a heroic dog-like figure burst up behind the Pog and with a dive tapped his ankles together. It was Scoffer. The crowd went ballistic as the Pog went face down, first into the sodden turf. Sploosh! He coughed as he inhaled some water and the Bogball fell free onto the pitch. Scoffer then booted the Bogball with all his might into the stands. The final whistle blew. The crowd went into a euphoric frenzy of singing and cheering. Stinky Heath had won the cup. They were now World Bogball champions for the 7th year running. Eric took the professor back to the ladder, which could be identified from miles away by the huge holographic weeping willow tree branches that spiralled down towards the ground. Once again, they seemed to move away and spread out as they drew closer to the ladder. Thank you, Eric, smiled the professor as he stepped onto the bottom rung. I believe I shall return soon. When you do, just shout. Eric turned and with a whoosh of his wings took to the sky. The professor climbed back up the ladder, which seemed to flux in length between the two realms. The climb itself was much shorter than he had first anticipated. He breathed a sigh of relief and then burst into laughter as he sat on the garage floor. Really, how wonderful, he chuckled to himself.